has concluded. This is according to the Pakistani military. 3 terrorists were killed even before they entered the base, is what we understand. The others caused some damage to 3 grounded aircraft and a fuel tanker before the attack was repulsed. Islamist terrorist group Tehreek-e-Jihad Pakistan has claimed responsibility for the attack in a statement sent to journalists by its spokesperson. TJP came to the fore only this year and has carried out a string of high-profile attacks in the country, including killing 12 soldiers at a Pakistani military base in southwestern province of Balochistan in July. Tehreek-e-Jihad is a relatively new and unknown group that was previously held responsible for a number of attacks on Pakistani targets earlier this year. It is unknown what is the affiliation of this group. It is also worth noting that this attack comes at a time when thousands of Afghan refugees are being forced to leave Pakistan. The reason for this is being speculated to be a pressure tactic by the Pakistani government aimed at forcing the Taliban to accept the Durand line. This isn't the first time that a Pakistani airbase or any military target has been attacked. Previous attacks have been carried out by the TTP and ISIS-K. Pakistani terrorists had also hit Karachi naval base in 2011 in what is said to be a revenge for killing of bin Laden. This was one of the most prominent attacks that took place in Pakistan, especially when it came to the naval base, where a P-3C Orion aircraft was also destroyed. The naval base attack had in fact spoken about the radicalization process within the Pakistani military establishment as well. Meanwhile, statements were coming in from the ISPR regarding it. They did go ahead and say that Mianwali training airbase of Pakistan Air Force came under terror attack. Due to the swift and effective response by the troops, it has been foiled. Safety and security of personnel and assets have been secured. This is from the DG office of ISPR that this particular statement had come in. Meanwhile, the Pak army on attack has said that 3 terrorists were neutralized even before they could enter the base. In total, 9 terrorists were killed. Remaining 3 terrorists have been cornered due to timely and effective response. This is when they suspected there were 6 in the entire campsite. Meanwhile, some damage has been there to the 3 already grounded aircraft and a fuel bowser, which is to say a tanker. We had in fact spoken to some people from Pakistan as well as to India to understand the impact of such terrorist attacks on Pakistan's military. Let's listen in.
History has revealed that the strategically significant frontier lands in Afghanistan and Pakistan have been witness to violence over the centuries. And yet another generation risks life and limb in this, as this region continues to remain in the spotlight. Now, mianwali is almost next to the Indus River, and that's close to where the last attack at Lucky Mariwat took place. And like you rightly said, lately there have been large number of attacks which have taken place. 17 soldiers have been killed in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in the last few weeks. Dera Ismail Khan and Lucky Mariwat are amongst those places. As per a report, since June 2022, 665 militant attacks have taken place in KP province. The Pakistan Institute for Conflict Studies and Security Studies said that the first half of the current year witnessed a steady and alarming rise in terror and suicide attacks, which have claimed over 389 lives across the country. The fact also remains that whether it is the IS, IKP, TTP, Al-Qaeda or Taliban, they have all thrived in this jihadi ecosystem that the Pakistan army has created and sustained.
This crucial question is, do you think that the Afghan border or the sending back of Afghan refugees is something that could have resulted in this?
I think that it can strongly impact, because why we have closed down the Afghan border, because we had this view that we had so many terrorist groups and organizations from this passage at the Great, that's why we're going to close them.
Pakistan being a nuclear weapon, it's only a time before these terrorists actually train their guns on areas that could in fact have weapon storage or fissile materials, or even could be a Pak nuclear reactor. Are you worried?
Uh, I would like to clarify that this is how you, as an outsider, would look at things. While you're living in this country, and when you see the security protocols that are being implemented for not just sensitive sites, but in general, because terrorism is a major issue that we have been facing since decades. So, nuclear assets, nuclear properties, anything that has to deal with the military, that has to deal with the defense of Pakistan or the defense of the state, they are not easily accessible. Security lapses happen all around the world, just like this terrorist attack, and it was not very damaging. They just damaged a grounded plane, and they just tried to enter it, and they were neutralized. So, had it been unsecure situation, or had the Pakistani military had been sleeping, they would have done damage that could have, they could have caused a bigger damage. So I think the military of Pakistan, all the security forces, all the law enforcement agencies are very much active and very much aware of the threats that they are facing. And it's not going to happen very soon. And I think we are a protected state and we are in good hands. So the world which is actually looking at us should not worry. Security lapses happen all around the world.
Well, at least 150 people were killed and many injured after a devastating earthquake with a magnitude of 6.4 struck northwestern districts of Nepal. The earthquake's impact extended as far as India's capital, New Delhi, and the national capital region, which is about 800 kilometers, almost 500 miles away from the epicenter. In Nepal's Jajarkot, a 6.4 magnitude earthquake caused houses to collapse, resulting in the deaths of at least 150 people and injuries to several others. Officials expressed concern that the death toll could increase due to the communication disruptions in many affected areas. The U.S. Geological Survey initially reported that the earthquake's magnitude as 5.6 with a depth of 11 miles, while Nepal's National Earthquake Monitoring and Research Center identified the epicenter in Jajarkot, approximately 250 miles northeast of Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. Following the powerful earthquake, both helicopters and ground troops were rapidly deployed for rescue and assistance efforts. As dawn broke, rescue helicopters were sent to the affected area, and security forces on the ground diligently worked to extract the injured and rescue those trapped in the debris, as stated by the Nepal police. Now, Nepalese Prime Minister Pushpa Dahal has also visited affected areas by the helicopter and took stock of the situation. 3 helicopters have been prepared for now to fly to the earthquake-affected areas, carrying medical teams and medicines to Jajarkot. Up till now, officials have stated that these helicopters will have been dispatched from Kathmandu as soon as the weather conditions improve. Nepal is unfortunately quite used to such severe earthquake events. In 2015, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake caused around 9,000 casualties, with hundreds and thousands of structures being destroyed in Kathmandu and other towns nearby. The Himalayan region is also known to be quite prone to earthquakes because of the excessive activity of tectonic plates. Devastation and complete chaos was witnessed in Jajarkot. Over 150 people have lost their lives and dozens others have been injured. Death toll is expected to rise as rescue operations continue. The earthquake had its epicenter at Jajarkot. Now, this is the mid-western region of Nepal and is fairly densely populated. The hilly district is around 500 kilometers from Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. Rescue workers are trying to clear the roads to reach the affected region, and there have been reports coming in that a lot of infrastructure damage in and around that region have been reported, to which the government is now trying to fly in the requisite support. Nepalese Prime Minister Pushpa Damal had visited the area that was affected by the earthquake, and he did take stock of the situation. 3 helicopters have been prepared for now to fly to the earthquake affected areas, carrying medical teams and medicines. Up till now, officials have stated that these helicopters will be dispatched from Kathmandu, and the weather is also something that they are monitoring so that they would be able to send in these helicopters, especially in areas that require immediate attention. Meanwhile, we have a tweet coming in from the Prime Minister on this. The Prime Minister said that he's deeply saddened by the loss of lives and damage due to the earthquake in Nepal. India stands in solidarity with the people of Nepal and is ready to extend all possible assistance. Our thoughts are with the bereaved families and we wish the injured a quick recovery.
बिहा भएको छोरा हैन बिहा भएको एउटा छोरी छ एउटा छोरा छ त्यो मेरो नाति एउटा छ अनि नाति नै एउटा छ दुईटा नानीसित उसको श्रीमती पनि अलि उस छ उसको श्रीमती पनि गर्ने जस्तो अवस्थाको छैन संस्कार भनेर आज गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ यहाँ हजुर आज छोरो चाहिँ भेटियो अरु चाहिँ चारजनाको अरु
एक्चुअली देखेंगे कि 9th November 2022, 9th November 2022, there was the one earthquake. If you see this, the map, you can see this 9th November 2022, 6.3 magnitude का earthquake हुआ था. ये देख रही हैं? इसके बाद से आप इधर में जाइए तो फिर जनवरी 2023 में 5.8 magnitude का हुआ. This earthquake. Again, ये नवंबर के जिस अब साउथ ऑफ द ईस्ट में 6.2 earthquake 3rd October 2023. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि ये जितने आप लाइन देख रही हैं तो हिमालय का जो भी नेपाल हिमालय है कंसिस्ट ऑफ डिफरेंट सेस्मोटेक्टोनिक सेटिंग्स. इसमें बहुत से फॉल्ट्स होते हैं, डिफरेंट फॉल्ट्स जो कि सेस्मोजेनिक फॉल्ट होते हैं. जो फॉल्ट जब होता है, फॉल्ट क्या है, 2 ब्लॉक का डिस्प्लेसमेंट है, मीन्स इट इज द डायनेमिक ऑब्जेक्ट. समटाइम्स फॉल्ट स्टार्टेड टू बी क्वाइसेंट, समटाइम्स फॉल्ट स्टार्टेड टू बी डायनेमिक. तो अभी जो नेपाल अर्थक्वेक का जो आपने देखा होगा, ये जो सबसे बड़ा अर्थक्वेक हुआ था 7.9 मैग्नीट्यूड का 25 अप्रैल 2015, ये इसका लोकेशन था, एपी सेंटर था. कल जो अर्थक्वेक हुआ 23:32:54 में रात में, वो ये अर्थक्वेक जो है ये नवंबर वाला जो अर्थक्वेक है 2022, द अर्थक्वेक ऑफ 2022, जस्ट इट वाज द ईस्टर्न साइड ऑफ दिस November earthquake. But it was all propagated. If you come here, then you can see the 7.9 earthquake aftershocks occurred 7.3, biggest aftershock, first aftershock. So it was occurred in between the November earthquake as well as it's the aftershock of the 7.9 earthquake, 25th April 2015. Why it is happening? Because when the one earthquake occurs, it releases the strain energy. That strain energy accumulates somewhere. And it keep on accumulating and keep on increasing. So once is the shearing strength or bearing strength of the rock material exceeded, then that zone rock ruptures, means breaks, and then earthquake happen. So several types of the earthquakes, 5.8, 6.2, 6.3, again 6.4 occurred in this zone. So huge amount of the strain energy has already been released.
It is in fact day 29 of the Israel-Hamas war, and the war has intensified on many fronts. As I was saying, today is day 29 of the Israel-Hamas war. Let us take a look at the latest updates coming in from the war front. Israel targets Hamas Chief's home with a missile. An Israeli drone is said to have fired a missile at the Gaza home of Hamas Chief. IDF, meanwhile, has said that it has eliminated terrorists and located Hamas weapons cache. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visits Jordan. Anthony Blinken had been in Israel and held talks with the top leadership there. Israel has urged its citizens to reconsider foreign travel. Hamas now is stressing on prisoner release for hostage swap, and IDF again strikes terror targets in Lebanon. That northern border of Israel is slowly becoming active. Skirmishes reported from that area, but again the IDF carrying on with its targets in Lebanon, especially Hezbollah fighters. And Israel has deported thousands of Palestinian workers back to Gaza. There were a lot of Palestinian workers who were in fact stuck in Gaza area once the war had started. They were kept in detention camps, and now they have all been deported to Gaza. Meanwhile, a report in the New York Times citing expert analysis and satellite images, photos and videos stated that Israel used at least two 2,000-pound bombs during an airstrike on Jabalia last Tuesday. The report quoted hospital officials who stated that the dozens of civilians were killed and hundreds were wounded in that strike. Israel said it was targeting a Hamas commander and fighters, as well as the network of underground tunnels used by Hamas to hide weapons and fighters. The report claims that the evidence and analysis showed that the Israeli military dropped at least two 2,000-pound bombs on that site. The report states that Israel is not being very clear on what weapons they used on the Jabalia refugee camp. Experts quoted by the New York Times who had a look at the images are divided on whether the munitions that were in fact used were dropped were bunker busters or not. While critics say that such bombs are complete overkill because of their potential for collateral damage and go against the claim that Israel is trying to keep the civilians safe, its military leaders, however, maintain that such heavy ordnance was necessary to target the underground facility. The Israeli military has released footage showing tanks firing artillery rounds and soldiers moving through buildings reduced to rubble amid the ongoing military operations in Gaza. The Israeli army claimed that troops killed dozens of terrorists and destroyed Hamas terror infrastructure. The footage also showed monochrome footage of targets being hit in the air raids. Israel's ground forces encircled Gaza City after stepping up a bombing campaign. It says aims at wiping out the Hamas after the militant group killed 1,400 people and took over 240 hostages in an October 7th assault on southern Israel. As the war between Israel and Hamas enters its 29th day, Prime Minister Netanyahu has rejected U.S. calls for a humanitarian pause in the Gaza region. Netanyahu said that no ceasefire with Hamas is possible until hostages are freed. He stressed that Israel refuses to any temporary ceasefire that doesn't include release of hostages. Our victor will be singular and clear. It will deliver the message to our enemies, a message that will resonate for generations. The goal of our enemies is the destruction of the state of Israel, and I say to you, I say to them, our enemies will fail. As relates to the north, I repeat and say to our enemies, do not mistake us. A mistake will cost you dearly. A mistake will cost you something you cannot even imagine. In the meantime, we continue to act on the diplomatic front. This morning, I met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. I welcomed his message here. I welcome that of President Biden and the American nation. I showed Secretary of State Blinken, I showed him a video clip from one of the cameras from the Gaza Strip. He spoke about this. In it, two youngsters, brothers, watched their father murdered. One of them has lost his sight, calls out to his mother. That's just a small part of the horrors in that video clip. I convey that we are proceeding with all our might, and Israel refuses any temporary ceasefire that does not include the return of our kidnapped hostages. Israel will not permit the transfer of fuel to Gaza Strip and oppose the transfer of funding to Gaza. Citizens of Israel, from the outbreak of war on the Black Sabbath, we have lost many civilians, fighters, soldiers, members of the security services, police and emergency workers. We've lost incredible combat soldiers, beloved Israelis, salt of the earth, people who fought with their bodies, their nails against these monsters. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Tel Aviv on Friday. The United States' top diplomat is in the region for the second time in less than a month to push for humanitarian pauses in the Gaza war. He empathized with Israel's right to take all necessary measures to prevent a recurrence of the October 7th attack. However, he also stressed the importance of how Israel conducts these actions, particularly in safeguarding the well-being of civilians affected by the conflict initiated by the Hamas. He said that Israel must protect civilians in its bombardment of Gaza. Blinken's visit comes after Israel said that its troops had surrounded the Palestinian enclave's biggest city, the focus of its drive to wipe out Hamas. The White House had earlier said that any pauses in fighting should be temporary and localized. It has dismissed calls from Arab and several other nations for a full ceasefire in the war, which is now in its 29th day.
To make clear that as long as the United States stands, Israel will never stand alone. Today, in my fourth visit to Israel since October 7th, I reiterated that in all my discussions with Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Herzog, the Security Cabinet. I reiterated and made clear our support for Israel's right to defend itself, indeed its obligation to defend itself. That includes through the additional assistance that we've worked with Congress and we're working with Congress now to provide for Israel's defense, as well as for urgent humanitarian needs in Gaza. This right to self-defense, indeed this obligation to self-defense, belongs to every nation. No country could or should tolerate the slaughter of innocents. You've heard me speak to some of the stories that Israelis have experienced on October 7th. Today, we saw additional images, additional footage collected by the Israeli government from video cameras, some the terrorist zone, others in communities that were attacked. It remains almost beyond the human capacity to process, to digest.
The U.S. House approved nearly $15 billion aid package for Israel, which was initiated by Republicans and faces uncertain prospects in the Democrat-led Senate.
The U.S. House passed a bill to provide almost $15 billion in aid to Israel on Thursday, a Republican initiative proposal that may not survive in the Democrat-led Senate. The funding would include $4 billion for Israel's defense systems to counter short-range rocket threats. It's the first major legislative action under new Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson. However, it may be doomed to falter when it hits to the next chamber of Congress, because the bill combines aid for Israel with a cut to the tax-collecting IRS and leaves out funding for Ukraine. President Joe Biden has promised a veto should it make it through Congress. Instead, he has asked lawmakers to approve a broader emergency spending package that includes funding for Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. The Senate's Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also said he would not bring the House bill up for a vote. Meanwhile, the IRS has been given extra cash to ramp up services under a new law Biden signed last year. That move was opposed by many Republicans. And they said slashing the agency's budget is essential to offset the cost of the military aid to Israel. The U.S. already gives Tel Aviv almost $4 billion per year in military assistance under a 10-year plan that began in 2016. The standoff between the two chambers could mean it will be weeks before Congress approves any emergency spending plan.
Eyal Waldman, an Israeli entrepreneur and former combat fighter, has tragically lost his daughter in an attack by Hamas. He has now called for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's resignation, asserting that the Israeli government should take responsibility for its failure to prevent the attack. Take a look at the story.
This is Danielle and Noam and Jesse.
I'm at the high-rise home of Eyal Waldman in Tel Aviv. His 24-year-old daughter was killed on October 7th with her boyfriend Noam Shea. He shared with me their story.
Danielle and Noam, they're amazing kids, like really loved having fun, doing stuff, and enjoying life.
No?
And then on Friday, they decided to go to this party of freedom, love, and peace, the Supernova Festival, with a lot of music, DJs, and so on. So they brought their dog to her mother, said we'll come Saturday morning to pick her up. They went down south, they were in the party, and then those creatures came from Gaza and started slaughtering, raping, cutting parts, taking eyes out, doing awful things to all those people. And Danielle, Noam, and her friends got in a car, got out of the party. They went south, which probably would have been smart because most of the kids turned north, and it was more free. But then 3 terrorists from behind showed them. We found the car. We've seen trails of 3 Kalashnikov shells from behind shooting at the car. We found like a Gaza SUV, a Toyota SUV, about 150 meters north of them, with 3 bodies, 1 out of the car and 2 inside. And then we found a motorcycle south of them, so they really couldn't escape. And they were shot. Out of the 5, we think 1 is a hostage, and 4 are dead.
How are you processing things, first of all?
It's difficult. I think losing a son or a daughter is something no one should experience. And unfortunately, we're experiencing now after the murder of Danielle and her boyfriend Noam. It's definitely a very difficult time for my ex-wife, Danielle's mother, her brother and sister, and for me as well.
But you not only lost a daughter, you also lost a potential son-in-law.
Yes, they were talking about getting married, and unfortunately that wouldn't happen. You know, my ex-wife, I think 2 or 3 days ago, said that she had a dream of Danielle in a wedding dress. It was really painful because this will never happen. Danielle will never wear a wedding dress. And instead of doing a wedding, we buried them together. We had a funeral.
Your opinion, what went wrong from the Israeli side?
Oh, we completely messed up. I mean, just amazingly how messed up we were. So our intelligence failed. Our communications failed.
So this wasn't just a failure of surveillance, but also on a political level?
Obviously, there is responsibility on the government, on the prime minister, no doubt. They should definitely resign shamefully and remove their places.
So what's next?
I hope that after this crisis that we went through, after the murder of Danielle and Noam, that is an amazing sacrifice, an unbelievable pain, we will be able to do something and create peace, but only after destroying Hamas and Islamic Jihad and making sure that the people that have done what they've done are eliminated from this place.
What sort of world would you like them to have experienced?
You know, a world of peace, a world of freedom. You know, I think Gaza citizens do not deserve what they're going through now. Gaza citizens should be free, should be celebrating, should have amazing hotels on the beach. They have amazing beaches there. I've been there multiple times. They should have amazing agriculture. They should have amazing things. Hamas and Islamic Jihad are responsible for what Gaza is now. In 2005, when we left, there were a lot of agriculture, tourism, other infrastructure. They've destroyed everything and went to war with us. I hope now, after this, they and we will help them rebuild this, to really build an area where we can live together in synergistic relationships, both economic and tourism and whatever, and build great two states for the two people.
Egil, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, moving on, there has been a significant surge in the smuggling of people at the eastern border of the European Union. An increasing number of migrants are attempting to enter the European Union through the Baltic route. There are suspicions that Russia and Belarusian leaders Putin and Lukashenko may be exploiting these migrants for their own strategic purposes. Take a look as we hear this.
Different uniforms, the same aim: securing the border between Latvia and Belarus. For the past 2 months, Latvian border guards and the country's military have been patrolling the EU external border. That's because there has been a surge in illegal crossings. Latvia, an EU country, is currently a prime destination for migrants from Syria, Afghanistan and several African countries who enter from Belarus. Authorities estimate that more than 11,000 people have been intercepted so far this year. more than ever before.
This crossing point is closed and has been secured. There is no traffic passing through here anymore. But Latvia's border with Belarus is almost 173 kilometers long.
80 kilometers of that are now protected by this fence. It's been built in the last few months and it's being extended. But it's not enough to deter everyone.
They try to climb over the fence. Some of them, they are trying to dig under the fence. So there are still quite many cases when they try to damage the fence. They are very creative and trying to use all the opportunities and ways to get in.
Authorities say it's a coordinated effort. It's not the first time they've seen something like this. 2 years ago, thousands of migrants stormed the border between Belarus and Poland. It was allegedly encouraged by Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko as a way to exert pressure on the EU in retaliation for sanctions on Belarus. Most of the migrants were headed to Western European countries like Germany, which are still favored destinations. German authorities say that now migrants are being smuggled on a route through Turkey, via Russia, and from there on to Belarus, and then into the EU.
Lukashenko is playing the same deceitful game as Putin. We have to watch this carefully, especially with Belarus, which is de facto dependent on Russia. Both are using migration as a weapon to tear our society apart and destabilize Europe.
People who manage to cross into Latvia are picked up and driven to Germany by car for $1,600 per person. That's according to Latvian media. Those caught attempting to cross are returned to Belarus, a policy criticized by human rights organizations. On some days in September, as many as 100 people attempted to illegally cross into Latvia. That's unlikely to change soon.
We would like to be optimistic, but we still have to be realists. And the situation, currently, there is no any sign about possible improvement.
In the meantime, Lithuania and Estonia have sent reinforcements to Latvia to help secure the EU eastern border.
Well, descendants of tribal leaders executed by the German colonial forces are demanding the repatriation of skulls of the deceased individuals believed to be held in Berlin Museum. Among the victims are Mangimeli, a prominent leader of the Chaga tribe who fiercely opposed the German colonial presence.
The town of Moshi, on the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro, is home to the Chaga tribe. Isaria Meli's grandfather was Mangimeli, leader of the Chaga when they fought German colonists, but lost. Several years later, the Germans hanged Meli and others, thinking they were going to rebel again. They took several schools back to Germany.
What was done to Mangimeli, to me and my family, we are not satisfied. It planted fear into our lives. This act wasn't normal. It was an act of great violence that was done to us. And that is why we have not lived in peace all these years.
This museum tells Mangimeli's story, his leadership of the Chaga tribe, and his rebellion against the Germans. The fact that the Germans not only executed him, but beheaded him and took his school to Berlin means a normal grave will not be an option, even if the school is returned.
We have decided that after its return, his skull will not be buried in the ground, because his body was not legally buried. His body was laid to rest without proper rites, and where he was laid, he cannot be seen. Therefore, we believe his spirit is not at peace, and we are looking at a place where he will be commemorated.
Mangimeli used to own all this land here, as he was chief of the Chaga tribe. It is now owned by his grandson and his generations. That tree there was where the German colonizers hung him and 18 others.
Zabron Kiwelu's grandfather was among those killed here. His school is also in Germany. A DNA test has confirmed the relationship. Kiwelu wants more than just the school. He also wants compensation.
We request that the Tanzanian government take a firm stance to ensure that the German government pays us. If the government maintains this stance, we could be paid even today.
Isaria went to Germany to take a DNA test, but says officials there could not find a school with a link. His 50-year-old fight to find his grandfather's remains and bring them home continues.
Tech billionaire Elon Musk spoke alongside British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in London's AI Safety Summit as he welcomed China's engagement on artificial intelligence safety and said he wanted to see Beijing align with Britain and the United States on the subject. Take a look at this report.
Like-minded governments and AI companies have today reached a landmark agreement.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on Thursday hailed an agreement between leading AI developers and governments to test new artificial intelligence models before they are released. He said the accord on the final day of his two-day AI Safety Summit would help to manage the risks of the rapidly developing technology and protect humanity from the potential threat it poses.
The late Stephen Hawking once said, "AI is likely to be the best or worst thing to happen to humanity. If we can sustain the collaboration that we have fostered over these last 2 days, I profoundly believe that we can make it the best. Because safely harnessing this technology could eclipse anything we have ever known."
The list of countries that had signed up to the safety testing collaboration did not include China, whose representatives were not included in the second day of talks. But the day prior, Sunak secured China's backing of the Bletchley Declaration, another international effort to manage the risks of AI.
It wasn't an easy decision for you to invite China, and indeed lots of people criticized me for it, but I think it was the right long-term decision, because any serious conversation about AI safety has to engage the leading AI nations.
Sunak welcomed U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris to the second day of the AI summit, as well as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. A conversation between Sunak and Elon Musk on the tech billionaire's X platform was to mark the final words on AI. According to two sources at the summit, Musk told fellow attendees on Wednesday that governments should not rush to roll out AI legislation.
From deals to end the U.S. auto strike to WeWork on the brink, this is the week in numbers. Up to 33% is the pay rise agreed for work at General Motors. The agreement with union negotiation follows similar deals made by Ford and Chrysler parent Stellantis.
From deals to end the US auto strike to WeWork on the brink, this is the week in numbers. Up to 33% is the pay rise agreed for workers at General Motors. The agreement with union negotiators follows similar deals made by Ford and Chrysler parent Stellantis. That ends an unprecedented coordinated strike at the Detroit 3, and S&P auto analyst Mike Wall says other makers will have to match the deals.
I think at the end of the day, what you will end up seeing is this labor rate escalation will likely translate to other automakers. There's going to be upward pressure there because, again, automakers are going to see that competitive competition for workers.
Almost 50% was the plunge in WeWork shares on Wednesday. That, after reports the firm will file for bankruptcy as soon as next week, crushed by debts and losses. It's a stunning fall from grace for the shared office space company, which was valued at $47 billion only a few years ago. $113 billion is how much Japan's government will spend to help consumers battle inflation. That includes tax cuts and moves to trim energy bills. Critics say it's more about boosting Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's poll ratings than boosting the economy. 3% was the after-hours drop in Apple shares on Thursday after it said holiday season sales this year would be about the same as last year. Wall Street analysts had expected a rise of close to 5%. Boss Tim Cook denied reports that Apple was losing market share to Huawei in China. And almost $1.8 billion was the latest quarterly profit at Samsung, a third up on the previous period. The South Korean tech giant cheered investors by saying it saw signs of a turnaround in demand for chips. Later in the week, US peer Qualcomm said it too saw signs of a silicon rebound.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said that the government will be spending over 17 trillion yen, which is $113 billion, on a package of measures to cushion the economic blow from inflation, which will include tax cuts. The government projects that spending plan will boost Japan's GDP by around 1.2% on an average. Let's take a look.
Japan unveiled major measures to help ease the pain of inflation on Thursday. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida set out the plans. He said the package would total around $113 billion. It includes temporary cuts to income and residential taxes. Tokyo will also give payouts to low-income households and subsidies to curb gasoline and utility bills.
By putting together income tax cuts and wage hikes next summer, I want to ensure a situation where growth in household income exceeds the pace of inflation.
The government projects the spending plan will boost Japan's GDP by around 1.2% on average over the next 3 years. It said gasoline and utility subsidies will help push down overall consumer inflation by about 1 percentage point. Inflation has hurt Japan's economy and stayed above the central bank's target of 2% for more than a year. But some analysts doubt whether the tax cuts and payouts will help boost consumption and economic growth. One former Bank of Japan board member expects the measures to lift GDP by just 0.19% for the year. Other market watchers believe Thursday's measures could worsen the country's already stretched finances. The spending may force the government to issue more bonds, adding to Japan's public debt, which is the biggest among major economies.
Moving on, after the Enforcement Directorate made startling claims that a courier who was caught with rupees 5 crore in cash told the agency that the promoters of the Mahadev betting app paid Chhattisgarh Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel rupees 508 crores, a political storm has erupted over that controversy. With elections just round the corner, sensing an opportunity, the BJP has seized upon the controversy. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hit out at Congress saying they did not have to leave the name of Mahadev.
इन्होंने तो महादेव के नाम को भी नहीं छोड़ा है। दो दिन पहले ही रायपुर में बहुत बड़ी कार्रवाई हुई है। रुपयों का बहुत बड़ा ढेर मिला है। लोग कह रहे हैं कि ये पैसा सट्टेबाजों का है, जुए का खेल खेलने वालों का है, और जो उन्होंने छत्तीसगढ़ के गरीबों को, छत्तीसगढ़ के नौजवानों को, उनको लूट करके जमा किया हुआ है। लूट के इसी पैसे से कांग्रेस नेता अपने घर भर रहे हैं।
Meanwhile, Union Minister Smriti Irani alleged that the Chhattisgarh Chief Minister was using the betting money to fund the Congress campaign in Chhattisgarh. Reacting to Irani's allegations, Congress General Secretary in charge of communications, Jairam Ramesh, says that I only want to say that this is a clear misuse and it is revenge politics. That's by Jairam Ramesh.
कि छत्तीसगढ़ में भारतीय जनता पार्टी भुखलाई हुई है, घबराहट में है, अत्यंत परेशानी में है, क्योंकि उन्होंने साफ देख लिया है कि छत्तीसगढ़ की आम जनता स्पष्ट रूप से बहुमत कांग्रेस को ही देने वाली है। इसीलिए आखिरी दिनों में ईडी का भरपूर दुरुपयोग किया जा रहा है और अभी अभी सिंघवी साहब ने आपको बताया है कि मार्च 2022 से लेकर छत्तीसगढ़ सरकार कार्रवाई कर रही है। इसकी जानकारी आपको दी जाएगी विस्तार से। जो कार्रवाई की गई है छत्तीसगढ़ की सरकार से, छापे मारे गए हैं दिल्ली में, उड़ीसा में, मध्य प्रदेश में। पर दुबई में तो हम छापा नहीं मार सकते ना। दुबई में तो सिर्फ केंद्र सरकार कार्रवाई कर सकती है। एक मामले में जो अभी लोकसभा एथिक्स कमेटी के सामने है, उसमें तो खूब दुबई की बात होती है। पर इस मामले में महादेव ऐप के बारे में दुबई में जो कार्रवाई करनी है, अभी तक केंद्र सरकार ने उसके ऊपर कुछ किया नहीं है। हालांकि ऑनलाइन बेटिंग को 28% जीएसटी भी लागू कर दिया है। इसको कानूनी दर्जा दिया गया है। ये गैर कानूनी नहीं है, इसको कानूनी बना दिया है और उसके ऊपर 28% जीएसटी भी लगाया दिया। तो ये बिल्कुल साफ है। और कल आपने देखा होगा, पढ़ा होगा, बीजेपी सरकार ने अपनी घोषणा पत्र निकाला है छत्तीसगढ़ में। जो रेवड़ी की आलोचना करते थे प्रधानमंत्री, जो हमारे गारंटी की आलोचना करते थे ये प्रधानमंत्री, कल हमारे बीजेपी की ओर से जो घोषणा पत्र निकाला गया है वो सिर्फ नकलचिक घोषणा पत्र है।
Well, when it comes to climate change, Earth has been suffering when it comes to the pollution factor, and we get you all those stories about how climate change is playing havoc across the world. Now, for the third consecutive day this week, Delhi's air quality remains at severe level, with an air quality index plummeting beyond 500. Over the past week, the air quality in Delhi NCR has worsened, primarily due to gradual decrease in temperatures, stagnant winds and trapped pollutions, and at an increase in the burning of post-harvest paddy straw in Punjab and Haryana. Meanwhile, Delhi Environment Minister Gopal Rai called upon his union counterpart to become more active in addressing the air pollution problem, saying it's not just the national capital but the entire north of India that is breathing polluted air. Rai pointed out that the air pollution issue is not confined to Delhi alone and that the situation is the same across the whole of North India.
के अंदर पिछले 2 दिनों में जिस तरह से प्रदूषण की स्थिति में बढ़ोतरी हो रही थी, उसको देखते हुए दिल्ली में कल से कंस्ट्रक्शन पे प्रतिबंध लगाया गया, गाड़ियों पे प्रतिबंध लगाया गया, पानी का छिड़काव शुरू हुआ। आज हम देख रहे हैं कि कल की अपेक्षा आज प्रदूषण के स्तर में सुधार देखा जा रहा है और सुबह जो AQI था वो 407 पर था, लेकिन अभी भी ये गंभीर स्थिति में है। और उसको देखते हुए दिल्ली के अंदर जो है हमारी कोशिश ये है कि ग्रैब 3 के जो नियम है, जो व्हीकल पोल्यूशन है, डस्ट पोल्यूशन है, उसको ख़ास तौर से रोका जाए। साथ ही साथ केंद्र सरकार से हमने अभी आज चिट्ठी मैं लिख रहा हूँ कि पर्यावरण मंत्री तुरंत जो है वो 5 राज्य के पर्यावरण मंत्रियों की इमरजेंसी मीटिंग कॉल करें, क्योंकि हम ये देख रहे हैं कि CAQM का आदेश भी राज्यों में लागू नहीं किया जा रहा है। CAQM ने आदेश दिया था कि 1 नवंबर से डीजल की जो बसें हैं BS3 और BS4 वो NCR में नहीं चलेंगी, दिल्ली के अंदर नहीं भेजी जाएंगी। लेकिन कल रात में आनंद विहार खुद गया 11:30 बजे और वहाँ हमने देखा कि उत्तर प्रदेश से सारी जो बसें हैं वो BS3 और BS4 की ही दिल्ली में भेजी जा रही हैं। तो अभी ज़रूरत ये है कि नियम तो बन रहे हैं, CAQM डायरेक्शन भी दे रहा है, लेकिन मैं देख रहा हूँ कि पूरे NCR के अंदर उत्तर प्रदेश, हरियाणा में पूरी तरह से जो है सारे आदेशों का जो है उल्लंघन किया जा रहा है, कोई मानने को तैयार नहीं है। जब तक सभी लोग नहीं मानेंगे, क्योंकि ये पूरे उत्तर भारत की समस्या है और सभी लोगों को उसका फॉलो करना पड़ेगा, तभी इसका समाधान हो सकता है।
In the latest about climate change, a wildfire raged near the coastal town of Gandia in Valencia in eastern Spain. The wildfire compelled the authorities to order the evacuation of at least 350 people. According to emergency services, strong winds hampered efforts to tackle the flames from the air as more than 34 crew members battled the blaze near the village of Montiselvo. The regional government has asked for help from the military emergency unit as well as firefighters from the entire region were drafted to tackle the blaze. Meanwhile, Italy has declared a state of emergency as floods in Tuscany intensify. As per the latest reports, 6 people have died due to severe flooding. The river Arno posed a threat to the historic city of Florence, but the high water point passed without major incidents. Campi Bisenzio, located northwest of Florence, faces a critical situation with widespread devastation. Around 190 people have been evacuated from their homes, particularly in Campi Bisenzio, where ground floor properties were damaged, cars submerged, and rescue efforts conducted with rubber dinghies. The Italian government declared a state of emergency and allocated €5 million to assist the worst affected areas. Approximately 48,000 people in the region are without electricity, and climate change is being blamed for the extreme rainfall and flooding. Tuscany's president stated it was the worst downpour in a century.
The water arrived here 70 centimeters. We were here to have dinner and we saw the water outside. It came through that door there and started coming in slowly, and in half an hour it all filled up with water. We couldn't stop the water. 10 families have their houses flooded. Luckily I'm a bit higher, but my cellar is destroyed. I've lost everything, the material that was in it. We are happy to be okay, but I've worked all my life. We are retired. I'm more worried about my children and grandchildren.
Well, that's all in this bulletin. Stay tuned to News 9 for further updates.
News 9 big coverage of 5 assembly polls. Mandate 2023.
Hello everyone, Namaskar. I'm music composer Ricky Cage. 3-time Grammy Award winner and a United Nations Goodwill Ambassador. And you're watching me on First Person on News 9 Plus.
This and more streaming now on the world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
Members of the Indian community are taking on Hamas terrorists in Israel.
About 206 reservists have been called for duty.
But back in India, their own community members are facing a twin crisis. First, displaced by the ethnic clashes in Manipur. Second, their dreams of returning to their holy land of Israel shattered. Members of the Banai Minashi community living in Manipur and Mizoram claim descent from one of the 10 biblical lost tribes of Israel. Their sole goal is to attain Aliyah, that is, to return to the Holy Land. But with the war raging in Gaza, their dream seems elusive.
we've been coming to Israel for the past more than 30 years now, under the guidance of our revered Rabbi Eliyahu Vichail from Jerusalem. Ali started in the, early 1990s, and then it's gone on to this day. Of course, there is a definite government policy to bring us here, but then of course things have been mired in bureaucracy and delays and all those things, which we all are very, very familiar with. So at this point of time, we have to understand one thing is that we have compulsory conscription over here. Anybody from the age of 18 to 21 has to serve in the IDF. That is there. And most of our boys do serve in that.
The ones in the IDF, we cannot talk to them because they